Iran's ancient secret exposed. Black Israelites were the first chosen ones. They buried this truth for centuries, locking it behind language, culture, and silence. But prophecy has no expiration date. What was hidden cannot stay hidden forever. And today, Iran's ancient secret will speak again, not through politics, not through speculation, but through evidence they never wanted us to connect. This truth stretches beyond what most have been taught. Before maps were redrawn and identities were stripped, there existed a people, marked, scattered, and silenced. And yet, they carried a divine seal through time. You were never meant to see them in the scrolls of Persia or among the ancient tribes east of the Jordan, but they were there. Their story isn't gone. It was just forced underground. The question is no longer if it happened. The question is, why was it erased? This message isn't about division. It's not a call to anger. It's a call to remembrance, for a generation bold enough to receive truth without fear, and brave enough to search for what others buried in plain sight. Now I need you to do 3 things. First, subscribe to this channel, because you're not here by accident. Second, like this video, because when you do, you help this truth reach those who need it most. And third, comment truth rises below if you believe divine truth is rising in this generation. Because something sacred is unfolding. And this is only the beginning. Black Israelites. The story of the Black Israelites cannot begin without first returning to the original sons of Jacob, 12 brothers, born from the bloodline of Abraham and Isaac, whose descendants formed the 12 tribes of Israel. These tribes, Judah, Levi, Benjamin, Ephraim, Manasseh, Simeon, Zebulun, Issachar, Naphtali, Dan, Gad, Asher, and Reuben, were never meant to be confined to one region forever. As early as the days of Moses, the covenant between them and the Most High carried both promises of blessings for obedience and dire consequences for rebellion. Over time, history unfolded as prophecy had warned. The kingdom was split, the people hardened their hearts, and eventually, the tribes were scattered. But this dispersion wasn't chaotic or without record. It followed a mysterious, yet traceable path, one that winds through the ancient roads of Africa, Mesopotamia, and into the heart of what is now Iran, Iraq, and regions once ruled by Persia. Long before the colonial empires wrote their version of history, the traditions of these scattered people carried echoes of the Torah. Across the highlands of Ethiopia, in the dusty hills of Mali, deep into the coasts of Nigeria and Ghana, ancient communities observed dietary laws, circumcised on the 8th day, kept the Sabbath, and recited oral histories that mirrored the language of the Hebrew prophets. These weren't borrowed practices. They were the remnants of an identity suppressed through generations, yet never fully erased. In the remnants of Babylon, among Persian communities, fragments of Hebrew culture were preserved, not in museums or textbooks, but in names, rituals, and oral traditions passed from father to son, mother to daughter. Black communities from these regions retained customs that couldn't be explained by coincidence. The genealogies, preserved with remarkable detail, often traced back to Hebrew patriarchs, not metaphorically, but literally. They were not converts, they were descendants. Even ancient Islamic historians like al-Yaqubi and al-Masudi, writing centuries ago, noted strange Jewish tribes deep in Africa, communities that spoke no Hebrew, yet obeyed laws older than Arabic. European explorers in the 17th and 18th centuries, encountering these same tribes, documented bewildering practices, menorahs in West African villages, Torah scrolls in tribal sanctuaries, and oral recitations of stories from Exodus and Kings in communities untouched by formal Judaism. All of this points back to a divine fingerprint scattered across the continents. A spiritual exile that had begun thousands of years earlier, just as it was written in Deuteronomy chapter 28 verse 64, "And the Lord shall scatter thee among all people, from the one end of the earth even unto the other." This wasn't a metaphor, it was a movement, forced, systematic, prophetic. The scattering was not just geographical, it was cultural, spiritual, and generational. Jeremiah chapter 29 verse 14 echoes the hope buried within that pain. "And I will be found of you, saith the Lord, and I will turn away your captivity, and I will gather you from all the nations, and from all the places whither I have driven you." These aren't just words on paper. They are a spiritual map, one that leads us back to the very identity that has been hidden for centuries. The question isn't whether the Black Israelites existed. The question is, why has the world gone so far to silence their identity? Because once the scattered tribes awaken to who they truly are, the systems that depend on their ignorance begin to crumble. This isn't about rewriting history, it's about remembering it. The memory of a people who crossed deserts and seas, who lived under empire after empire, who had their names changed, their language stripped, and their faith criminalized, and yet, they remembered. Quietly, carefully, faithfully. And now, the world is being forced to remember too. Iran's connection to the chosen ones. When we trace the threads of ancient civilizations, those that history has tried to blur, bury, or rename, we begin to see something extraordinary. Hidden in the folds of time, etched into stone reliefs and whispered through forbidden scrolls, lies a powerful connection between Iran and the people history once called the Chosen. The land we now call Iran was once the cradle of an ancient people known as the Elamites. Genesis chapter 10 verse 22 lists them as descendants of Shem, the children of Shem, Elam, Ashur, Arphaxad, Lud, and Aram. But this is not just a genealogical footnote. It's a declaration, a link, a forgotten inheritance. The Elamites were not pale figures in dusty scrolls. No, they were a dark-skinned people, regal and resilient. The depictions on temple walls and royal seals show features, hairstyles, and skin tones far more aligned with what today would be called African or Afro-Asiatic than the Europeanized images so often portrayed in religious art. But why is this significant? Because their homeland, ancient Elam, corresponds to what we now know as southwestern Iran, a region still holding secrets beneath its deserts and mountains. Secrets that have survived empire after empire, regime after regime. If you were to look at a biblical map and lay it beside a modern one, you'd see it, Elam positioned at the edge of the Persian Gulf, nestled in a corridor that so many biblical migrations passed through. Not far from where Daniel prophesied, not far from where Esther reigned. And definitely not far from where the dispersed Israelites could have journeyed and settled. The truth begins to crack the surface. Some of the lost tribes may not be lost at all. They may simply be misnamed, misidentified, or deliberately erased from memory. Scholars have long speculated that remnants of the Hebrew bloodline could have interwoven with the Elamite and Median peoples, especially during the Assyrian and Babylonian exiles. What if that bloodline didn't vanish? What if it transformed? Hidden in plain sight, waiting for a generation bold enough to uncover it. But as we dig deeper, as we connect these dots using ancient maps and historical records, something else becomes clear, something spiritual. This isn't just about history. It's about resistance, a pushback. There is an unseen war surrounding the exposure of this connection. The more these truths come to light, the more chaos seems to swirl around them, politically, religiously, even digitally. Could it be that Iran's tension with the rest of the world, especially in spiritual contexts, isn't only about oil, power, or nuclear ambition, but about identity? About the fragments of a divine heritage that still breathe under the soil? Is that why there is such intense global opposition, not just to the land, but to the people, the culture, the story? The prophetic layer is undeniable. In the spirit realm, truth shakes foundations. When you start connecting the Iranian Elamites to Semitic, Hebrew, and ultimately Israelite roots, you're not just correcting historical records. You're awakening something. A bloodline, a remnant, a prophecy. That awakening challenges everything the enemy has built through confusion, colonization, and counterfeit identities. It forces us to ask, if some of the first chosen ones walked the plains of ancient Iran, why have we never been told? Why has the image of the Elamites been quietly removed from popular history? And why does acknowledging their true heritage feel like spiritual warfare? Because light exposes darkness. And when you shine the light on this particular truth, when you trace the lineage, examine the ancient art, overlay the maps, and sit still with the weight of it, you realize this isn't just about where people came from. It's about where they're destined to go. And that destiny, buried for centuries, is now rising from the dust. Why the church feared this revelation? There's a reason certain truths were hidden, not forgotten, not erased, but carefully buried beneath centuries of ritual, doctrine, and well-polished pulpits. If you trace the footsteps of history, not just the one written in textbooks but the one encoded in silence, you'll find an uneasy truth. The church, as it evolved through the ages, did not always preserve revelation, it often curated it. From the opulent cathedrals of Europe to the missionary stations planted in the soil of Africa and the Americas, theology was repackaged, refined for power, tailored for empire. When colonizers stepped off ships, they didn't just bring weapons and flags, they carried Bibles. But those Bibles, while divine in origin, were used in ways that contradicted the very heart of the gospel. They were used to justify chains, erase names, and sever entire nations from the divine memory. In this silence, something disturbing began to grow, a version of Christianity that exalted whiteness as sacred and painted holiness in the image of empire. And from that distortion, the truth about who the Israelites were, who they are, was locked away, dismissed as irrelevant or dangerous. But why? Because if the true descendants of ancient Israel were no longer just faceless people lost in the dust of time, but rather those who bore the burden of slavery, exile, and rejection, then everything would shift. Systems built on supremacy would begin to tremble. The narrative of salvation, as monopolized by the powerful, would begin to lose its grip. When you tell a people for centuries that they are cursed, inferior, or forgotten, you never expect them to discover that they were actually the chosen ones all along. That's what terrifies the institutional church, not the idea of blackness in the Bible, but the implication that the face of God's covenant people never fit their stained glass depictions. This is where Revelation whispers louder than any pulpit. Revelation chapter 2 verse 9 and 3-9 do not scream, they reveal. They echo with the words of Christ himself, who speaks not just to faith, but to truth reclaimed. He speaks of those who say they are something they are not, and those who have endured tribulation, poverty, and slander, yet remain known and chosen in heaven's eyes. These verses do not accuse, they illuminate. So what happens when this revelation is no longer confined to the margins? What happens when this identity, long buried, begins to resurrect? The world is not ready to see the chosen ones among the oppressed, to realize that those trampled by history may have carried a divine lineage all along. The forgotten may be the very ones heaven never forgot. That's what shakes systems. That's what unsettles institutions. That's what makes the comfortable church afraid, not of the message, but of the mirror it holds up. And maybe, just maybe, that fear is the beginning of repentance. Prophetic signs, modern confirmations. They said history was sealed, forgotten, erased. But as the world rushes deeper into the age of information, buried truths are beginning to resurface, truths that shake the very foundations of what many believed was settled. A quiet unraveling is taking place. Scientists, unknowingly fulfilling prophecy, are piecing together fragments of a people scattered, yet never lost. In the realm of science, DNA studies are now whispering the echoes of the past. Genetic markers once thought insignificant are now showing deep connections between African diaspora communities and the ancient bloodlines of the Near East. Researchers, some reluctantly, are beginning to admit that the ancestry of West African descendants, many taken through the Atlantic slave trade, may trace further east than previously acknowledged. Tribal customs, oral traditions, even dietary restrictions in these communities strangely align with Levitical patterns, patterns long buried under the labels of colonization. But it's not just the science, it's the language. Words spoken by tongues thousands of miles apart are showing remarkable similarities. Hebrew-rooted expressions, rituals, names, preserved not in textbooks, but in everyday village life. Not because of religion, but because of identity. Unshakable, deep, prophetic. And now, something strange is happening all over the world. Movements, people waking up, stirred by dreams, visions, unexplainable convictions. Men and women, without ever meeting, are testifying of the same revelation: we are the people of the book. Not out of arrogance, not from rebellion, but from divine prompting. Elders from forgotten tribes speak of angels visiting them in the night. Young ones in urban cities are recounting dreams of scrolls being opened and ancient names being restored to them. The Spirit of God is whispering, and those who are listening, really listening, can feel it. Prophecy is unfolding, now. Isaiah once cried out, "And it shall come to pass on that day, that the Lord shall set his hand again the second time to recover the remnant of his people." That day is no longer a distant future. We are living in, again. Ezekiel declared centuries ago that the Lord would take the children of Israel from among the nations, gathering them from every corner of the earth, and bring them into their own land, making them one nation again. This regathering is not simply geographic. It's spiritual, mental, generational, and it has already begun. Voices once silenced are now speaking with boldness. Those who once wandered in confusion are now standing with clarity. And everywhere, from city streets to remote villages, there's a shift in the atmosphere. A sense that the hand of God is reclaiming what man tried to erase. The names may have changed. The skin may be rejected, but the covenant remains. You can feel it in the resistance, the shaking, the urgency, the way this message is either violently opposed or wholeheartedly embraced. There is no middle ground. Because prophecy doesn't whisper, it roars when it's time. And now, the roar has begun. This isn't a theory, it's not a trend, it is the unfolding of a divine plan, sealed long ago in heaven, now being revealed on earth. Not just to those who were ready, but to those who were chosen. The bones Ezekiel saw, they are rattling again. But this time, not just in a vision. In real time, in real people, the breath is returning, and with it, so is the truth. What this means for you. If you've ever felt like you didn't belong, like your very existence made others uncomfortable, if you've carried the weight of invisibility in rooms where your presence should have been honored, then listen closely. Because that discomfort, that rejection, that spiritual resistance, it wasn't just random. It was because your identity carries divine power. This world has trained you to question yourself, to look for validation in flesh and blood, to trace your worth through bloodlines and borders. But the truth is deeper than the surface. Your identity isn't simply found in DNA. It's found in destiny. You were born with something ancient etched into your soul. Something that makes the darkness tremble every time you walk into a room, even if you don't know it yet. You are not forgotten. You are not misplaced. You are not irrelevant. You are spiritually marked. And every trial, every silent war you've fought in your mind, every door that slammed shut, every time you wondered why life has been so hard, it was all because hell has known what you carried before you ever did. So now I'm asking you, what if everything you've gone through wasn't punishment, but preparation? What if the very reason you've been under attack your whole life is because you are part of the remnant? A chosen bloodline, not by race, but by revelation. Not by skin tone, but by spiritual assignment. You see, this isn't just about lineage. It's about alignment. The enemy doesn't fear your ethnicity, he fears your awakening. Because when you discover the truth about who you really are, you become dangerous to every lie that's been passed down for generations. You carry a call that can't be manufactured, only discovered. And once you find it, everything changes. I want you to think for a moment. Forget what the world has called you. Forget the names, the labels, the boxes. Now ask yourself, who does God say you are? What if the reason you've been so misunderstood is because you were never meant to fit in, but to stand out? What if you were never meant to blend into culture, but to transform it? This is your moment, not to prove your worth, but to remember it. You don't need a title. You don't need applause. You don't even need to be understood. You just need to align. Because when you align with the Spirit, you will no longer chase your heritage, you will walk in it. So here's what this means for you. The pain had purpose. The silence had meaning. And the questions you've wrestled with in secret were heaven's invitation to go deeper. You are not here by accident. You were sent, planted, chosen, and now, awakened. Let that settle. Let it break chains in your mind. Let it confront everything you thought you weren't. Because this is the beginning of who you've always been. As you sit with everything you've just heard, I want you to close your eyes, not in weakness, but in surrender. Breathe in deeply, because this moment is not just the end of a video. It's the beginning of a realignment, a restoration, a resurrection of something sacred within you. Wherever you are, whether in a quiet room, a noisy street, or a place that's felt spiritually dry for years, I want you to know this: God has been watching. Not passively, not distantly, but intently, like a potter watching the flame kiss the clay, refining, not destroying. So I speak prophetically over you now, not by might, not by power, but by the Spirit of the living God. I declare a restoration over your identity. Every label that this world, your past, or even religious misunderstanding placed upon you, it is falling off. You are not forgotten. You are not disqualified. You are not broken beyond repair. You are chosen, and you have always been chosen. Every part of you that was made to feel like it had to shrink to survive, your voice, your calling, your heritage, your dreams, I speak to those dry bones now. Rise, awaken, return to original design. You were never meant to be tame. You were never meant to be silent. You were born from divine fire. You carry a lineage of power, of faith, of covenant. And the world tried to bury that truth beneath centuries of deception, but today, God peels back the veil. I pray for a holy boldness to flood your spirit. No more fear of man. No more apologizing for your fire. Let courage grip your bones. Let your prayers shake walls. Let your footsteps leave holy imprints in dark places. You were not created to blend in, you were birthed to shift atmospheres. I rebuke every lying voice that whispered you were too late, too damaged, too different. I come against every generational deception that blinded your eyes to your royalty. In the name of Jesus, I declare your spiritual sight be restored. Scales fall off now. Let clarity flood in. May revelation invade your dreams, your thoughts, your discernment. No more walking blindly in systems that were never built for your freedom. Today, you awakened. Father, place a hedge around this listener. Shield them from spiritual counterattacks, from emotional fatigue, from the noise that seeks to drown out your whisper. Surround them with angels on assignment, warriors who recognize the chosen when they see them. Let your word be a sword in their mouth and peace a banner over their household. Let them hunger for truth and despise the counterfeit. Let them love righteousness and reject passive religion. Let their very presence trouble every spirit not aligned with heaven. They are marked, sealed, and called. And to you, who stayed until the end, to you, whose spirit leaped at words you've never heard but always knew, I leave you with this. You were never forgotten. You were chosen before time began. Heaven remembers your name. Now rise. Share this video with someone who needs to remember who they are. Don't keep this truth to yourself, multiply it. And if something inside you stirred, if your soul echoed, "This is me," I want you to comment below right now, "I'm awake." Let the heavens and the earth witness your agreement. And subscribe, because this was only the beginning.